What's good? What's good? Thanks for coming through. My name is Queen and I run Mix Vixen. If you are new here, what's up? If you're not new here, hey boo, thanks for coming back. I really appreciate that. So I'm sure you already saw the title of this video. And yes, we're going to talk about Euphoria, the show that I really enjoy. And we're going to talk about colorism, something I really hate. Both things can exist. I can enjoy something and then also point out the faults within the project. It's called nuance. It's called duality. It's common. Go get you some. Although I really enjoy Euphoria, there is still something happening in the show that is just blatantly horrible. I think because colorism is so normal and so ingrained in the cloth of our everyday lives that I guess the amount of people I want to be talking about it aren't talking about the blatant colorist issues in the show Euphoria. Colorism can be extremely obvious and it'll be so obvious to me, but just still very oblivious to everyone else. Hopefully with this video you will learn to look for the things that I look for when I take in my media to pinpoint colorism. You can't eradicate colorism if you don't even know it exists. Euphoria follows a group of high school students as they navigate love and friendships in a world of drugs, sex, trauma, and social media. The series is executive produced by Drake, along with manager Future the Prince. The ensemble cast includes actor and singer Zendaya, Moid Apatow, Angus Cloud, Eric Dane, Alexa Demi, Jacob Alaradi, Barbie Ferreira, Nikki King, Storm Reed, Hunter Schafer, Algie Smith, and Sydney Sweeney. Also, Coleman Domingo is in this. Euphoria is an American adaptation of an Israeli show of the name, and all episodes are written by Sam Levinson, who also serves as executive producer. The original isn't available anywhere on streaming platforms. I actually looked for it so I could look and maybe compare, but it's nowhere. The series creator Sam Levinson drew inspiration from many of his personal experiences while adapting the show for the US. So there are lots of his life, a white man's life, inserted in this series telling this story. He revealed that he battled drug addiction for years before finally becoming sober. The show is edgy, it has lots of sex, drugs, teenage stuff. I do notice that a lot of people think that the show is too much for high school, but I literally went to a high school where people were having sex in the stairwell, so I probably am not a good barometer of what is too much because they was wilding in my high school, so I don't know. I start this by asking, why do y'all only want light-skinned black women and girls in your work? Like, why is that the only thing you want? And I figure I start this with a question because I think it'll help everyone watching this video start thinking about why also. Colorist messages kind of sneak their way into your world. There's no way you can completely bar yourself from it. If I wanted to remove myself for all sources of colorism in media, I literally would probably have to move to the moon. Nah, humans have been there, so I bet there's colorism on the moon. Maybe Mars? A lot of the conversation around colorism is usually tied into desirability, which isn't my favorite viewpoint of talking about colorism because I want liberation. I don't want to just be desired as a dark-skinned person. I want to be a full black, free, dark-skinned person. But since a lot of the conversation stays there, I'm going to navigate this conversation through that. So one of the things that I noticed right away in Euphoria is that Rue's mom is the only phenotypical, monoracial, black woman in the whole fucking town. So I live in New York, so I can be really biased about what diversity actually looks like in this country. But I have never heard of a town with only one black, dark-skinned woman in the whole town. Never heard of that. If you've heard of that, let me know in the comments, but I have never heard of that. I noticed that right away. And I did give it grace, and I was like, well, let me see if the story goes. Maybe her mom has friends, but the show isn't really adult-centric. It's really about the children. We don't really see adults in the show a lot. So I never got to see if this black woman knew any other dark-skinned black people. Like, really? Only Rule's mom? That doesn't make any sense. I say it often, desirability won't free you, but it does give you access and it does reduce harm. So I do understand why people tend to attach themselves to that pathway when it comes to dismantling colorism. And since the media is very good at propaganda, very good at conditioning our minds and sending us messages of who is worthy of empathy, who is worthy of care, who is worthy of love, who is worthy of compassion, and who is not, the erasure of dark-skinned women in media can lead to our death because we are being brainwashed to believe that only one phenotype of black person deserves compassion, care, love, and that leads to only thinking one kind of black person, the preferred black person, which is a light-skinned person, that their life matters. The way Rue looks, she's light-skinned, she has that loose mixed girl hair. She does fit many white supremacist standards of beauty, and that does have a high influence on how we feel about Rue. Whether you believe it or not, it does. We can be empathetic with Rue. We can not be so hard on Rue. Rue is a hot mess on this show. Like, she stresses me out. She's a hot mess. But I do believe that a lot of the grace that we give the character Rue is because of the way she looks. She even presents herself like she's really disheveled, unkept. She looks a hot mess. But that character, that light-skinned mixed girl can exist like that. Dark-skinned black women cannot exist that way. We always have to prioritize how we look in ways that lighter-skinned black people do not, because it's so easy for people to perceive us as ugly. I am darker skinned. I have 4C here. This is an install. I can't just be rolling out the bed with crust in my eyes and going outside. People will, especially in New York City, will assume something is wrong with me. But Rue, the character, is allowed to exist like that, and no one even says anything about her appearance. And I know it's because of how she looks. Like, when have we seen a dark-skinned character exist like that on TV and no one has said anything about her needing to get it together? She need to lotion her face. She needs to, no one does that. If a dark-skinned character existed like that, we would call her a bum, say she a hot mess, because that is how the privilege of being lighter skinned and also having that, I don't really like the lettering system for here for the purpose of understanding, like that 3C mixed girl curly hair type. All of those things are more acceptable and palatable by society. So the standard for it to be looking good isn't as high as it is for a dark-skinned person with a 4C hair type, a tighter hair coil. The dark-skinned black woman erasure in Euphoria is, I think, a little unique in comparison to a lot of the other media that I consume. I don't know everything that you guys watch, but what I consume, I watch a lot of black shit. So usually when I'm watching something that colorism is like evident and it becomes popular conversation on the internet, it's usually because they have replaced a character that should be dark-skinned, so it's either a historical character is replaced with a lighter-skinned person who does not have the features that align with the European standards of beauty. So we usually see colorism like that in TV shows, or we see them if they do have a dark-skinned woman in a TV show. The dark-skinned woman is the villain. She's the butt of the jokes. She's the comic relief. She's subservient to some other light-skinned person or white person. She's not central to the story. Not everyone is rooting for her life. Not everyone is rooting for her love life or her career. Like, she is usually not the center of the story. She's angry, witty. She supports whoever is the main person of the story. That's usually how, when I see people talking about colorism on TV shows, like a lot, when it's like those kind of very specific kinds. I think while Euphoria may have slipped through the cracks for some people, not everyone, because I have seen some people have these conversations on my sides of the internet, is Euphoria has blatantly decided, has made the executive decision that dark-skinned black girls don't exist. So the only black girl characters on the show are Rue and her younger sister, and they are children of they have a black mom and a white dad. So they are the only black girl characters that we see on the show. So, what's good? This is Editor Queen talking right now. So, when I recorded this episode, it was when we were at episode 3 of the Euphoria season 2 season. And when the episode came where this character, Bobby, played by Veronica Taylor, popped up on my screen, I was like, oh, okay, here's an opportunity. Obviously not good enough for me because it happens in the second season, in the middle of the season. But it was like, okay, a dark skin character. Let me wait and see what happens. So I sat on this video since that episode. And what has happened with Bobby's character? Not a damn thing. We learned absolutely nothing about the character this season, and she's really just subservient to Lexi through the little bits and pieces that we see her in this series, this season. So, still whack. They do decide, lots of shows and movies do this, they do allow dark-skinned black men to exist. And we know it's because the darker you are, the more masculine you are considered. So they will cast a darker skinned black man, and darker skinned black men are more popular in Hollywood than light skinned black men. And that's the only time where you see a kind of like switch in desirability of colorism, only in desirability. Light skin is still the preference. That is when the only time you are allowed to see blackness, to see people my color or even darker exist. When they want black representation, they usually pick a man and they pick a darker skinned black person. With women, they're okay with them being a lighter skinned black person because they still want the woman in the role to be desired by the masses. And when it comes to desirability, because colorism affects the world and not just the Americas, when they want the character to be desired by everyone, they usually pick a lighter skinned black person. So yes, she hits the mark of being black, or I would be more specific to say a lighter skinned biracial person with black ancestry is what they will like. That's their go-to pick, but it's because the way desirability lies. It's easy to also assume colorism isn't happening here because the mom exists and because we have these two dark-skinned men characters in the show. But the mother she's a caretaker. She doesn't have a whole lot of lines. She's not very central to the show. So when I'm talking about colorism in media, I'm talking about how much to the front of the show, right? How center is that person to the story? The mom isn't really that centered in the story. It's not about her. It's about Rue. Just because we see a few dark-skinned people in something doesn't mean that colorism has not happened at all, you know? If there are dark-skinned black people sprinkled in a story, does it mean that it's not colorist? No, it doesn't. We have been brainwashed by so many colorist systems that many of us need to see a light-skinned black person or a light-skinned mixed-race person to actually care about certain characters in media, to actually desire, love, have compassion, even to just simply like a character. A lot of people have been so brainwashed that they do need for that person to be a lighter skinned black person or a lighter skinned mixed race person. Black mixed race people are used as a tool by the media to do this. You're just a tool in their system to do this. And this isn't representation. This is the complete opposite. This is the erasure of dark-skinned black women. Highly colorist shows, something like In the Heights, remember that BS? People like to use the excuse that we picked the best people for the part, they auditioned and the best people got the part, and they fail to realize that there's an implicit bias in how you choose who got the part. There's a reason why, especially when it comes to women characters, black women characters, if you want people to desire her, if you want people to care about her, if you want people to root for her, if you want people to like her, that you will choose the lighter skinned person and most likely pick the biracial black person in the mix. Not even a light-skinned black person. You will pick the biracial looking one because it transcends. Everyone can relate to her. Everyone can see themselves in her. Everyone can desire her. And no, that's not true. Does anyone in the show know that Rue is mixed race? Is Rue like the only mixed race person or the only biracial person in the United States who doesn't have some kind of biracial angst? So many things about Rue. Her drug use, her navigating grief, her navigating being a teenager, her navigating mental disability, her navigating love, her navigating her sexuality and gender. But they don't insert anything about her navigating her racial identity. What mixed race person doesn't have some racial identity shit? It's weird. We live in a very race-driven society. So even if you're not looking at her seeing a black person, for some people, she may pass. To me, she does not. I have family members that look like Zendaya. But for people who don't have or are not around a racial mix-ups and seeing black people look like many different things, even if you don't think she's a black person, if she walks into a room, you're going to think to yourself, I wonder what... Because most times when people are asking you your race is because they want to know how to treat you. So it's just really weird that this is not touched on at all in the story. There are some biracial myths that I think they'll connect to a lot of why people are not attaching colorism to Euphoria and also Rue's character is because a lot of people think mixed race people are always light skinned. And it's not true at all. There are mixed race people, and I'm talking black and another race, who can be just as brown as me. Okay, they exist. A lot of times when people are thinking of a mixed race person, they're thinking of people who look like this. They are not thinking of people of mixed race who look like this, though. And the reason they are not is because the media has told you that mixed race people only look like this and that they keep it in a binary of black and white when there's a whole spectrum of how you can look as a mixed race person and as a black person. My family, all black. Mad variations of blackness, though, going on up in my family. Darker skinned biracial people exist. Darker skinned mixed people exist. But the media loves to only show us the light skinned mixed face person with the hair and features that are closely related to white supremacist ideas of beauty and desirability. And I have race conversations a lot. I do it a lot on my podcast, Tea with Queen and Jay. Check that out. And a lot of times people jump into the one drop rule, which is a white supremacist system created in the United States to determine who is black and who is not. And yes, I do think that there's no need for that at all anymore. But what they don't realize is that when they bring that into the conversation, they are also enforcing colorist ideas as well, because there are mixed race black people who look like me. A mixed race person who is dark skinned and a mixed race person that is light skinned will have different experiences. The world will treat them definitely, but that's under the same scope of colorism. It has the same similar influence as white supremacy, and I wish that people understand that mixed race people can also look like a spectrum of things and not just the people that I showed earlier. Don't think that mixed race people only look like one thing, because when you do that, you help reinforce these colorist and white supremacist ideas about black people and also mixed race people as well. So how will this all harm dark-skinned women? The media we consume, TV, movies, advertisements, social media, etc., all has an influence on what we think about people and how we think we should treat people. It also determines who we think deserves care or harm. Bottom line, it determines who life matters. If you are erasing dark-skinned black women from media, then you are sending a message and conditioning people to believe that dark-skinned black women's lives do not matter. I still don't believe that desirability will free dark-skinned black people, but I do think that us being erased from media will contribute to our deaths and can make us extinct. You may think I sound a little extreme, but I don't. The media propaganda conditions us to believe who we should care about. And we know that a lot of that bleeds into our legislation, bleeds into our laws, bleeds into how we treat each other on a systemic level and on a personal level. The many victims of state-sanctioned violence by the police in the USA are usually not light-skinned black people. They're usually dark-skinned black people. When black, trans, and black gender non-conforming people, deaths are acknowledged, because we have to be honest, a lot of their deaths aren't even acknowledged. These folks are mostly dark-skinned, and that cannot be ignored. We die in higher numbers than our light-skinned counterparts. So being picked and desired by someone is the least of my worries, but I do understand how the media conditions people to understand that we deserve care, we deserve not to be harmed, and not our lives matter. Also, relative to darker skinned black Americans, lighter skinned black Americans experience few encounters with the criminal justice system and are punished less harshly in schools, make more money, like all of this stuff. It starts with the conditioning that we get from media, and it all goes down. If media continues to push the propaganda that black dark-skinned women don't exist, or if we do exist, is to be subservient to lighter-skinned black people, that we are pushing dark-skinned black women to be more, because we're already a surplus population, a disposable population, it means that dark-skinned black women's lives don't mean anything at all outside of labor and servitude. That is why, even though I enjoy the show Euphoria, I cannot let it go unnoticed what I see happening and how they are harming dark-skinned people and dark-skinned black women, to be specific. Like, it has to stop. We have to point it out. We have to let them know that we see it so that it can stop, because at the end of the day, it kills us. So if you made it to the end of the video, thank you. I'm happy that you made it here. I would like to know your thoughts about what I talked about today in the comments. Make sure that you are subscribed and all of that, and become a patron. Please become a patron. I would really enjoy that. Until next time, you are a bad bitch. You are enough. Stay fly.